Gap Selling, Getting the Customer to Yes by Keenan. Picture this. It's 1979, and the air has that sharp bite that makes your cheeks tingle. I'm 11 years old, standing on a football field where the entire universe has shrunk down to just 10 yards of grass. The scoreboard shows 0-0, and we're in the final moments of the fourth quarter. It's 4th and goal. Our opponents are perched on our 10-yard line, and all we need to do is hold them back for one more play. There I am, playing safety. Here's the thing, though. I'd never played competitive football before. Honestly, I barely understood what was happening half the time. My coach, bless him, saw that I was fast but completely clueless, so he gave me the simplest instruction imaginable. "Keenan," he said, "just run as fast as you can and tackle whoever's holding the ball." And you know what? I was pretty darn good at it. So the quarterback snaps the ball and drops back. Someone yells, "Pass!" and I look up to see the wide receiver just a few feet away from me. The quarterback launches this wobbly, pathetic excuse for a throw. Seriously, it looked like a dying duck tumbling through the air. The ball hangs there, seemingly forever, and both the receiver and I are standing directly underneath it. My heart's absolutely pounding. This is my moment. I've got the timing worked out perfectly in my head. I'll let him catch it, and the instant that ball touches his hands, I'm going to launch myself at him with everything I've got. And that's exactly what happens. He catches it. I absolutely demolish him. I jump up, completely psyched, riding this incredible adrenaline high. But then I notice something weird. I'm the only person on my team celebrating. Meanwhile, the other team is going absolutely wild. Wait, what? I tackled the guy with the ball. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. So what went wrong? Here's what I didn't know. My actual job was to prevent him from catching that ball in the first place. I had tackled him 5 yards deep, right in the middle of our own end zone. Touchdown. Game over. We lost. Not because I couldn't tackle. Not because I wasn't athletic enough. We lost because I didn't understand the game I was playing. Today, we're diving into a different kind of game. The game of selling. And according to author and sales guru Keenan, most salespeople are losing deals for exactly the same reason that 11-year-old kid lost that football game. They don't truly understand what game they're playing. In his groundbreaking book, Gap Selling, Keenan tosses out the old rule book entirely. He argues that everything we've been taught about building relationships, closing techniques, and handling price objections is fundamentally broken. He's promising us a new approach, one that's more predictable, more effective, and honestly, a lot less painful for everyone involved. By the time we're done here today, you won't just learn some new sales technique. You'll understand the hidden psychology behind why people actually buy anything, and how to become the person they trust to guide them through one of the most terrifying things any human being ever has to do: change their current situation. So let's dive in. The book summary. Let's be real for a second. If you've ever worked in sales, or even just tried to convince someone to see things your way, you've probably felt that gut-wrenching frustration when everything falls apart. The prospect who seemed so excited suddenly ghosts you. They stop responding to your emails. They go dark, as we say in the business. Or maybe they hit you with, "Your price is too high." Or you discover you lost to some competitor you didn't even know existed. According to Keenan, these aren't just random bits of bad luck. They're symptoms of a deeper problem. And here's the uncomfortable part. We, the salespeople, are creating these problems ourselves. We're losing because we're playing by completely wrong rules. We think selling is about delivering the perfect pitch, becoming buddies with the prospect, or having the flashiest features. But that's not the game at all. The real game, the one that actually matters, revolves around one concept: the gap. At the heart of every single sale, there's this gap. It's the distance between where your customer is right now, what Keenan calls their current state, and where they want to be in the future, their future state. The current state is where all their problems, frustrations, and pain live. The future state is where their hopes, dreams, and desires reside. The gap is simply that distance between the pain and the pleasure. And here's the secret that unlocks everything. Without a gap, there is no sale. Full stop. This brings us to the first of what Keenan calls the 9 truth bombs of selling. Ready? Here it is. No problem, no sale. Think about it for a second. People don't actually buy things. They buy solutions. They buy change. They're unhappy with something about their current situation, and they're looking for a way to make it better. Someone with a simple headache has a small problem. They might fork over $1 for an aspirin. The gap between their current state, ouch, my head hurts, and their future state, much better, is pretty small. The value is correspondingly low. But what if that headache isn't just a headache? What if you start asking more questions and discover that this headache is causing blurred vision? That it's making it impossible for them to finish a critical project worth $500,000? What if you uncover that the headache is actually a symptom of something much more serious, like a brain tumor? Suddenly, we're not talking about a headache anymore. We're talking about life and death. The gap between the current state and the desired future state just became enormous. So how much is that pill worth now? $1 million doesn't sound quite so crazy anymore, does it? The problem drives the sale. The impact of that problem determines how big the gap is. The bigger the gap, the more valuable your solution becomes. A great salesperson isn't someone who delivers a killer pitch. They're a master diagnostician. They're experts at uncovering the true underlying problem, not just whatever symptom the customer initially complains about. This leads to a pretty radical idea that contradicts decades of traditional sales training. Selling to a customer's stated need is actually wrong. Keenan tells this fantastic story about his old Palm Pilot. Remember those? This was back before iPhones, just a little digital organizer. One day, right before a major conference, the battery completely died. He had meetings scheduled all week but couldn't access any of his contacts or his calendar. Full-on panic mode. Fortunately, he found a store that sold Palm Pilot accessories. He walked in and told the clerk, "I need a charger for a Palm Tungsten T." He knew exactly what he needed. A charger. Simple, right? The clerk grabbed one for him, then asked, "Can I get you anything else?" Keenan was getting irritated. He was in a rush. "No," he practically snapped. "Just the charger, please." But just as the clerk was about to ring him up, he looked Keenan in the eye and asked this brilliant question. "Is the reason your Palm keeps dying because when you put it in your briefcase, the case presses on the buttons and drains the battery?" Keenan just stood there, stunned. "Yes, that's exactly what keeps happening." The clerk then pulled out a new case. It looked almost identical to the one Keenan already owned, but on the inside, it had these little cutouts positioned where the buttons were, so the cover could no longer accidentally press them down. Keenan walked out with both the charger and the new case. You see, he thought he needed a charger. But his real problem wasn't a lack of a charger. It was a poorly designed case that was constantly draining his battery. He had no idea what his actual problem was. If that salesperson had only sold him what he thought he needed, Keenan would have left the store, charged his device, stuck it back in that faulty case, and the battery would have been dead again the next day. The salesperson wouldn't have truly helped him at all. So here's the lesson. Never just sell to the stated need. Dig deeper. Your real job is to find the actual problem, the root cause, and solve that. This brings us to another truth bomb, one that might feel a bit uncomfortable at first. All sales are fundamentally about change. You might think you're selling software, or consulting services, or cars. You're not. You're selling a transformation. You're asking someone to leave the familiar comfort of their current state and take a journey with you into the unknown territory of a future state. And here's the tricky part. Customers don't actually like change, even when they say they do. Our brains are literally wired to prefer the familiar. We have something psychologists call a longevity bias. We automatically trust things that have been around for a long time. In one fascinating study, people were given identical pieces of chocolate. One group was told the brand was 73 years old. The other group was told it was a brand new company, only 3 years old. Guess what happened? The group that believed they were eating the 73-year-old chocolate rated it as tasting significantly better, smoother, richer, more refined. The other group called it waxy and meh. It was literally the exact same chocolate. Their perception was subconsciously altered just by the idea of longevity. This is the invisible force you're fighting against in every single sale. Your prospect's current way of doing things, no matter how inefficient or painful it might be, is familiar. It's the 73-year-old chocolate. Your solution, regardless of how brilliant it actually is the new, unproven brand. Because change is so hard, it means that sales are deeply emotional. Every time you ask a prospect to buy something, you're not just discussing features and benefits. You're tapping into this whole range of human emotions. Fear, insecurity, hope, ambition, anxiety, you name it. A Harvard Business School professor named Rosabeth Moss Kanter identified 10 common reasons people resist change. Things like loss of control. With the old way, they were in charge. But with the new way, who knows what'll happen? Excess uncertainty. Your product is new, so what if it doesn't work as promised? Loss of face. Maybe the old system was implemented by William, and if the company replaces it, doesn't that make William look bad? Extra work. Learning a new system takes time and energy they don't feel they have. And even real danger. What if this new software makes some of their coworkers' jobs obsolete? A great salesperson understands these hidden emotional currents swirling beneath the surface. They don't just sell a product. They manage the entire emotional journey of change. They make the customer feel safe, understood, and confident. So if people naturally hate change, how does anything ever get sold? This leads us to the next truth. Customers actually do like change, but only when they feel it's worth the cost. We'll only willingly step out of our comfort zone when we believe, deep in our bones, that the pleasure of reaching that future state will far outweigh the pain of getting there. The change has to be worth it. The gap has to be big enough. Your job isn't to somehow convince them against their will. It's to help them convince themselves that staying in their current state is actually more painful, more costly, and more dangerous than making the journey to the future state you can help them reach. So how do you do that? You have to ask the right questions. This brings us to another crucial truth bomb. Asking why gets customers to yes. Every time you ask why, you're peeling back another layer of the onion. You're getting closer to the core, to their deep, intrinsic motivation for even talking to you in the first place. Let's say a customer tells you they want a new system to help them delegate better so they can spend more time away from the office. That's the what. But what's the why? If you don't bother to ask, you might sell them a system that lets them work from home. But here's the thing. What if one customer's why is simply that they want to avoid rush hour traffic, while another customer's why is that they're about to adopt twins with special needs, and they need to be fully present at home, not just logged into a work portal? The same solution isn't going to work for both people. One will be happy with what you sold them. The other will feel like you completely missed the point. Knowing their intrinsic motivation allows you to tailor the solution perfectly. It lets you solve problems they didn't even realize they had. And look, if you discover that your product genuinely can't fulfill their core motivation, you have to be honest enough to walk away from the sale. It'll save you time and, even more importantly, protect your reputation. And this brings us to what might be the bluntest but honestly the most important truth bomb of them all. No one gives a shit about you. They don't care about your company's history. They don't care about your awards wall. They don't care about your laundry list of features or where you rank on the Fortune 500. They care about exactly one thing: what you can do for them. We don't live in the tell-me economy anymore, where salespeople had to spend the first 10 minutes of every meeting talking about their company, because there was literally no other way for customers to learn about them. We live in the show-me economy now. The internet is your resume, your blog posts, your videos, your LinkedIn articles. That's where you demonstrate your expertise. The actual sales meeting is not for talking about yourself, it's for talking about them. Your number one job, from that very first interaction, is to get the customer to trust you enough to let you help them. And they'll only do that if they believe you understand their world better than anyone else possibly could. So how do we actually put all of this into practice? It all starts with one of the most misunderstood and poorly executed parts of the entire sales process: the discovery. Keenan argues that the sale is won or lost during discovery. The close doesn't really happen at the end of the process. The close happens at the beginning. There's actually research from the sales analytics company Gong.io that backs this up. They analyzed over 1 million sales calls and found something fascinating. The closing calls for won deals and lost deals sounded almost identical. The discovery calls, however, totally different. In the calls that eventually led to a sale, the salesperson spent more than half the time just listening. The customer did most of the talking. In the lost deals, the salesperson talked for almost 80% of the call. This is exactly why traditional sales qualifying methods like BANT, that's budget, authority, need, and timing, are so deeply flawed. BANT is all about you, the salesperson. It basically forces the customer to prove they're worthy of your time. It's completely backward. Budget? People somehow find the budget when the problem is big enough. You can't possibly know what the budget should be until you've established the actual size of the gap. Authority? In today's business world, there are on average 5.4 decision makers involved in every B2B sale. You're almost never talking to a single person who has all the authority. Need? As we saw with that Palm Pilot story, customers often have no idea what they truly need. Timing? Timing is fluid. If you can show them that every single day they wait, they're losing money, losing market share, or falling further behind their competition, suddenly now becomes the right time. Instead of BANT, gap selling discovery focuses on really excavating the customer's world. To do this effectively, you first need a map. Keenan calls this the problem identification chart, or PIC. Before you even talk to a single prospect, you should sit down and create this chart. It's got 3 columns. First, problems. List every single problem your product or service can solve. Second, impact. For each problem, list the potential negative impacts it could have on a customer's business. Things like lost revenue, stunted growth, high employee turnover. Third, root causes. List the underlying reasons why those problems exist in the first place. This chart becomes your guide. It ensures you're asking targeted questions about problems you can actually solve. When you finally begin that discovery conversation, your goal is to uncover 5 critical elements of their current state. First, the facts. These are the literal, physical details of their business. How many employees do they have? What are their processes? How do they currently manage projects? Second, the problems. Here you need to separate problems into 2 distinct types: technical problems and business problems. A technical problem might be, our database doesn't share information very well between departments. The business problem is the actual impact of that technical issue. Because our database doesn't share information properly, we have to hire 2 extra people just to manually run reports, which costs us $10,000 every single month. Most salespeople focus on the technical problem. Gap sellers focus on the business problem, because that's what actually drives the sale. Third, the impact. You need to quantify the pain they're experiencing. Don't accept vague answers like, "We're not growing fast enough." Ask them, what does fast enough actually mean to you? Get them to a specific number. The impact might be lost revenue, decreased efficiency, or a seriously damaged reputation. Fourth, the root cause. Why does this problem even exist? Is it a broken process? Outdated technology? Lack of proper training? Your product should address the root cause, not just mask the symptom. Fifth, the emotional state. Are they frustrated, genuinely afraid, angry? Understanding their emotions helps you communicate in a way they can actually hear. To get all this information, you use different types of questions. Probing questions dig for details. Process questions ask how they currently do things. Provoking questions gently challenge their assumptions and get them thinking about their situation in a completely new way. Questions like, what happens when you, or if you tried this approach, what do you think would happen? And validating questions make sure you're on the same page. You repeat back what you've heard. So what I'm hearing you say is, this shows you're genuinely listening and gives them a chance to correct any misunderstandings. Throughout this entire process, you're also working to understand their desired future state. What does better actually look like for them? How much more revenue do they want to generate? How much time are they hoping to save? You need to get them to articulate and quantify this vision clearly. You want to anchor them emotionally in that positive future, so they feel pulled toward it rather than pushed away from their current state. Once you have a crystal clear understanding of both their current state and their future state, you can finally define the gap. The formula is simple. Future state minus current state equals the gap. Now the question becomes, is that gap big enough to justify the cost and effort of making the change? If they want to gain an extra $10 million in revenue, is your $100,000 solution worth it? Absolutely. But if the gap is only worth $200,000, that same $100,000 price tag might seem way too steep. The math has to actually make sense. This deep understanding is also the key to giving what Keenan calls a, quote, kick-ass demo. A demo is definitely not about showing off every single bell and whistle your product has. That's boring and completely irrelevant to them. A gap-selling demo follows 4 important rules. First, no discovery, no demo. Never, ever combine these 2 things. You simply cannot give a good demo if you haven't done a thorough discovery first. Second, no ifs. You should never have to say things like, if you happen to have this problem. You're supposed to already know their specific problems. Third, stick to 6 features maximum. Focus only on the handful of features that directly solve their biggest, most painful problems. Quality definitely beats quantity here. Fourth, anchor your customer. After showing how a particular feature solves their problem, ask an affirming question like, can you see how this would help you reduce your customer churn rate? This gets them to verbally confirm the value and anchors your solution in their mind as the benchmark that all other solutions will be measured against. This entire process, from that very first outreach all the way to the final signature, is fundamentally about building credibility. And this brings us back to one of Keenan's most controversial points. Relationships don't really matter. Well, kind of. He doesn't mean you should be a jerk to people. What he means is that being likable isn't what closes complex deals. Credibility is what closes them. People don't buy from people they like. They buy from people they genuinely believe can solve their problems. Studies like the one behind the book The Challenger Sale found that the most successful salespeople weren't the relationship builders. They were challengers reps who were so knowledgeable about their customers' industry that they could respectfully push back, challenge outdated assumptions, and actually teach prospects something new. They built relationships based on expertise and insight, not just friendship and golf outings. This expertise is what allows you to handle the inevitable bumps in the road. When a prospect goes dark on you, you don't send those desperate just checking in emails that everyone ignores. Instead, you hold them accountable by reminding them of the gap. You might say something like, I'm genuinely confused. You told me you were losing $10,000 every single month because of this problem, and you agreed that my solution would fix it. I'm honestly surprised I haven't heard back from you. Has something changed on your end? You bring the conversation right back to their pain and their goals. The same approach works for price objections. When a customer says, it's too expensive, you don't immediately get defensive about your pricing. Instead, you make them defend their objection against the value of their own desired outcome. I'm confused. You told me this problem is currently costing you $50,000 a month, and you said you really want to fix it. So how is my one-time fee of $40,000 too much to solve a problem that's going to cost you $600,000 this year alone? You shift the focus from the cost of your product to the much higher cost of their problem continuing. This approach completely transforms the entire sales dynamic. You're not some vendor desperately begging for a sale. You're a consultant, a strategic partner, a trusted guide. You're not, as Keenan bluntly puts it, the customer's servant. You're an asset to them. This means you actually have the right to say no. If a customer makes some unreasonable demand, like a 90-day free trial, without any commitment whatsoever, you have enough credibility to set reasonable terms or simply walk away from the deal. This philosophy extends all the way back to the very beginning, prospecting. Most prospecting emails and cold calls are absolutely terrible because they're completely about the seller. Hi, I'm so-and-so from XYZ company, and I'd love to grab 15 minutes of your time to tell you all about my amazing product. That has exactly zero value for the person receiving it. Gap prospecting is about leading with a problem instead. It's about creating genuine intrigue. You can do this by creating what's called a knowledge gap. For example, imagine an email with a subject line like, "Are you aware that 80% of companies using the same system you currently use rank dead last in their industry?" That disrupts their normal pattern. It triggers what I like to call their "oh shit" circuit and makes them genuinely curious. Your offer isn't to drone on about your product. Your offer is to share valuable insight they don't have yet. The value of what you're offering must always be greater than what you're asking for. Finally, for this approach to work across an entire organization, sales leaders need to build what Keenan calls a gap selling team. This means managing your pipeline not by constantly asking, "When will it close?" but instead asking questions like, "What is the customer's current state? What is their desired future state? What's the actual gap between them? And what is the next small, yes, we need to get to move this deal forward?" It means building what he calls a commit culture, where salespeople are held accountable for the accuracy of their forecasts based on actual data, not just optimistic gut feelings or wishful thinking. And perhaps most importantly, it means hiring the right kind of people in the first place. You're not looking for the typical slick, smooth-talking salesperson stereotype. You're looking for 9 core traits: curiosity, critical thinking, genuine empathy, strong problem-solving skills, natural leadership, creativity, a commitment to deliberate learning, coachability, and solid business acumen. You hire for the right mindset, not just an impressive resume. Because, at the end of the day, a great gap seller isn't just someone selling a product. They're a student of human nature, an expert diagnostician, and a master guide through the difficult process of change. They've learned the actual rules of the game, and they play to win, not just for themselves, but genuinely for the customer they're serving. When you step back and look at the core message of gap selling, you realize it's really about something much bigger than just another sales methodology. It represents a profound shift in how we think about the entire profession. For decades, sales has been taught as an act of persuasion, a battle of wills, where the salesperson's job is to convince, to overcome objections, to somehow push a product across the finish line through sheer force of personality. Keenan's work reframes it entirely. Selling isn't an act of persuasion at all. It's an act of diagnosis. It's not about you, the seller. It's about them, the buyer, and the difficult, deeply emotional journey of change they're contemplating. The most powerful lesson in this entire book, I think, is the idea that your greatest tool isn't your pitch, it's your curiosity. The ability to ask genuinely insightful questions, to listen with real empathy, and to connect dots in ways the customer hasn't seen before. That's the true art of selling. It transforms the role of a salesperson from a pushy vendor into a trusted advisor. It elevates the entire profession from a purely transactional game to a consultative partnership. You stop being the person who's trying to get something from the customer and become the person who's genuinely trying to give them something incredibly valuable. Clarity. Clarity about their real problems. Clarity about their actual goals, and a clear path to get from one to the other. This philosophy is incredibly empowering because it means you don't have to be the loudest person in the room. You don't need some larger-than-life personality or aggressive closing tactics that make everyone uncomfortable. You just need to be the most prepared person in the conversation, the most genuinely insightful, and the most truly helpful. So how can you start putting this into practice right now, today? Here are a couple of simple actions you can take. First, for the next week, just become an observer of gaps. In every conversation you have, with friends, with family members, with colleagues at work, don't try to sell or convince anyone of anything. Simply try to identify their current state. What are they complaining about? What frustrations keep coming up? Then listen carefully for hints of their future state. What do they wish was different? What are they hoping for? Just notice the gap between these two states. This simple act of observation will train your mind to see the entire world through a completely new lens. Second, take whatever it is you do, whether you sell a product, offer a service, or even if you're a student applying for internships or colleges, and create a simple problem identification chart for yourself. Ask yourself, what are the top 3 problems that I actually solve for other people? What is the real, tangible impact of those problems if they go completely unsolved? And what's the root cause behind them? Just the act of writing this down will fundamentally change how you talk about the value you bring to the world. That was a summary of Gap Selling by Keenan. We've explored the core ideas together today. But here's the thing. A summary is kind of like looking at a map of some beautiful country. The map can show you where the mountains and rivers are located, but it can never replace the actual feeling of hiking through those mountains yourself or standing right at the edge of that river. The real magic of a book like this happens in those quiet moments of reading, when a particular story, or even just a simple phrase, connects with your own personal experience in a way you never expected. This summary is really just a tool to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take for yourself. If anything we've talked about today has struck a chord with you, I really encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. Reading it isn't just about learning some new techniques. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you approach every single interaction in your life. You'll find a link to the book down in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you a new way to think about things, please do me a small favor and hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another potentially life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.